Good? Okay, good morning all. Welcome to this session on integrating displaced populations into climate change NDCs. My name is Manuel Marques Pereira. I'm the head of division at IOM for climate change, disaster risk reduction, and migration. It's a pleasure being here today to do this event with all of you. I will, without further ado, start to introduce our panelists. We have the pleasure to have here with us Mr. Sanjay Kumar Bokmik, who is the Additional Secretary for Environment at the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of the Government of Bangladesh, and is the focal person for the NDCs Action Project implemented by UNEP. Thank you, sir. Good morning. We also have Jessica Troni, which is a climate change and public policy specialist, currently head of the Climate Change Adaptation Unit for UNEP, with more than 17 years of experience in the private sector, the public sector, and for UNDP. Welcome. We have Sanjay, and I will let him introduce himself because I don't have his biography with me, but...
Hello. So my name is Sadiq Jafrullah. I'm working with the Global Platform for Action on Sustainable Energy in Displacement Settings, in short GPA, which is hosted at UNITAR. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we have Romeo Bertoloni. Romeo is the Deputy Director of Country Engagement for the NDC's Partnership Support Unit, charged with the management of the Bonn office and in-country and regional work of the partnership. Romeo joined the NDC partnership on a secondment from the German federal government. Welcome, a pleasure. And welcome to all of you that are here with us today. I think we can start, and today I have an extra difficult job because I'm the moderator and the participant. This is a bit of a double time. I will talk a bit just on a general reflection on the nexus and the challenge between displacement and migration in the context of climate change under the banner From Camps to Climate Negotiations. I'm basically humanitarian, and I've done all my career in humanitarian settings leading with displacement. There is significant challenges, not only because displacement has in many cases been created by natural hazards induced by climate. Generically, I think there's a lot of confusion today. We talk about natural disasters. No disaster is natural. Disasters are social economical phenomena triggered by hazards that can be natural or man-made. And this phenomena is, to us in IOM, a key component of engagement of the individuals that are facing these situations, right? They are not passive elements. They have a role. They have to contribute to their situation, but to the context in which they integrate. And in many times, displaced people and refugees found themselves at large in some of the most vulnerable and at-risk countries in the world. Which means when we talk about adaptation, when we talk about the future and the impacts of climate, we need to ensure that the governments that host them or the governments that have responsibilities over the protection of these citizens reflect those concerns, those needs, those future requirements into their national adaptation plans, into the national determined contributions. And so I think that there is a very large gap of understanding these realities for this very specific group of people, but also, and to put forward for our colleagues here to reflect, is if we project increased climate has impacts. If we project increased displacement, these numbers will grow. The need to mainstream climate mobility into the national planning of countries will only grow. This is an emergent field, and we will hear from our panel today a bit about these dynamics and what can be done and how can we all contribute to that. And so I would first pass and ask Jessica to talk a bit about climate change and related drivers, in particularly in the global south, climate-related migration, displacement, and resettlement. Jessica, over to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate. My name is Jessica Troney. I'm the head of the adaptation unit at UNEP. It stands for UNEP Environment Programme, based in Nairobi. We were set up in 1972, so we're 50 years old this year, to provide coordination in the UN system to mainstream the environmental dimension of sustainable development and to serve as the global advocate for environment. We have a governing body. We have 93 member states, so universal membership, and the Environment Assembly meets once every 2 years. So that's just UNEP. And I've been told there's a bit of a delay with the slides. So I'm waiting. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, and just also to say that this year we started our new medium-term strategy. We have 3 strategic priorities. The first is living in harmony with nature. The second is climate stability. And the third is towards a pollution-free planet. Next slide. Okay, so you may be aware that the 2022 Emissions Gap Report was published very recently. What it tells us is not good news. We're on track on current trends for a 2.8 degree temperature increase with a possible range of 3.3 degrees. So this is far above safe levels. And what that means is that the slower we reduce emissions, the more we will have to adapt. And this came out of a United in Science. This has got a life of its own. Came from a United in Science publication by WMO this year. The number of weather, climate, and water-related disasters has increased 5 times in the past 50 years, causing $202 million in losses daily. Big figure there. Okay, so I just want to tell you about how UNEP has integrated displaced populations into a project we have designed for the Green Climate Fund. It's due to go to the board following the signature of our accreditation master agreement. Just a little bit about the Kigoma region in the western part of Tanzania. This is where all of the displaced population in Tanzania is located. The Kigoma region has a population of 2.3 million people, spanning an area of 36,000 kilometers squared, currently hosting 280,000 refugees from neighboring countries in 2 camps. Just want to say the poverty level in Kigoma region is much higher than the national average. It's about 50%. Most people are subsistence farmers. They have between 0.2 to 2 hectares of land, and so their vulnerability is big. Okay, so just some facts and figures. We did a lot of research on the climate rationale, and what we found was that there was a notable increase in the shortening of the return periods of flood events. So going up, so 1 in 100-year flood events were becoming 7% more frequent, and 1 in 10-year flood events were becoming 7.6% more frequent. Added to that is dry spells, the number of dry months per year, so becoming much hotter and drier, and the higher temperatures increasing evaporation and evapotranspiration, having a perceptible effect on surface water resources. And what that's doing is it's reducing agricultural yields. What we found was that maize yields were reducing by up to 53%, and according to climate risk projections, they would reduce a further 17%. And what that was leading people to do was to search new lands for agriculture, taking away the trees, and also engaging in charcoal production. So in effect, leading to further land degradation and a magnification of the climate change risks. Should be said that most people in Kigoma use fuel wood for energy, so that was one of the challenges that we had when we were designing this project. Closed forest has gone down from about 20% to 5% since 1990. And there's a massive land clearance rate. Okay, so the refugees, the relationship between the host community and the refugees is overall good. There are informal employment arrangements between them, even though the law states that refugee communities cannot engage in income-generating activities. Fuel wood is collected by refugee populations outside the camps. And the UNHCR in particular arranges peaceful coexistence meetings between the two groups. But there are challenges, particularly on benefit sharing of agricultural production, even on land that is leased by host communities to the refugee communities. The protection of water streams, water bodies from pollution through use of the refugee communities for bathing and washing the clothes. That's an issue. And also there's gender-based violence experienced by host communities when they go looking for fuel wood. So there are issues, but overall, you know, that relationship is managed. So the project solutions, essentially because displaced communities are such a contentious political issue in Tanzania, and in many communities, it must be said, we really focused on a landscape approach, the role of nature in connecting these two communities. And so what we're doing is we're going to be focusing on between 20 to 25 villages developing climate-resilient land use plans in the host communities, promoting a system of community-based management of forests, and issuing certificates of customary rights of occupancy of land, which is actually in Tanzanian legislation, but they haven't had the funding or the support to be able to promote that process. In addition, the Tanzanian law does allow for village forest reserves to be established if communities take the responsibility for managing forest land. We're going to also be implementing flood and erosion control in the camps as well as outside, because the extreme rainfall events are causing gullies and soil erosion, and once that happens and it becomes bigger, you lose the land. It becomes very expensive to fix that land. Climate resilient agriculture interventions, very important for host communities. Within the camps, we were limited again because of the limited land space that they have, but we're focusing on mushrooms and beekeeping. And the beekeeping, of course, helps to protect the trees in situ. And also afforestation and agroforestry. And essentially what we will be doing is planting enough woodlots to be able to service 12% of energy needs in the region. Obviously, it's not the whole amount, but it will be complemented by other initiatives funded by, I think, Danida and GIZ on sustainable energy solutions. Okay, at this point, talking about energy, I do want to introduce, although I have a colleague here who's going to be talking more about it, the Global Platform for Action on Sustainable Energy. UNEP is the co-founder and a steering group member. It's headquartered in UNITAR in Geneva, and I will leave explanation of that to you. Okay, and the Copenhagen Climate Change Centre is a collaborating centre of UNEP, and they have a very significant role in progressing the GPA. Okay, another example I want to draw your attention to is a national adaptation planning process in Iraq, where we have supported the government to develop impact storylines. Essentially, pictures of what the future could hold in Iraq, given climate change. One of the things that we found is difficult is the gap between the language of Met scientists and what policymakers understand. And there is still a gap. We've been talking about this for decades. So instead of trying to produce deterministic projections, we've characterized storylines. So the one variable that we're not clear about in Iraq is precipitation. What will happen to extreme precipitation? So the two storylines in Iraq are drier, warmer temperatures, which we know are going to happen, with less extreme precipitation. And the second climate storyline is drier, warmer temperatures with more extreme precipitation. So these points here are essentially what has happened in Iraq to date. Increased salinity, water shortages have adversely affected agricultural areas. There's been an estimated 250 kilometres squared loss of fertile land annually due to desertification. There's been migration flows because of these processes from the rural to the Basra city. And it's estimated that there are 4 million Iraqis that have been displaced through this process. So this has already happened. Has that moved? Okay. Okay, so possible climate hazard changes. Iraq is dependent on the Euphrates-Tigris river coming upstream from Turkey. And so it's at risk of a decrease in precipitation, decrease in flows, sea level rise going up, and obviously increase in temperature and humidity, combining on decreased water resources under all RCP scenarios, all emission scenarios. So at the higher end, this is going to really challenge Iraq. Okay, so socioeconomic impacts, serious flood of many parts of the region, potential for international conflict. This is an interesting one. Following changes in sea level line, your maritime boundaries change, and there's a potential for international conflict because of changes to shipping routes. Obviously, tensions to water access, health impacts from heat stress, impacts on labor productivity. Remember, this is a very hot region. Impacts on agriculture, and so on. But the rural-urban migration trends will be exacerbated. Okay, another one, Pakistan, post-disaster needs assessment. UNEP was responsible for producing the environment chapter. And what we found, and it's what we're finding in many other countries where we're doing these analyses, is that it's not just climate change that's producing these impacts, it's also baseline development trends. It's landscape degradation that is reducing the capacity of the land to absorb water. And so this is what you can find in Pakistan. It's the lack of infiltration capacity, but it's also lack of water management, check dams, and other engineered ways of stopping the water flow. All of that contributed to the massive floods. Okay, and just a little bit about UNEP's work on these ongoing challenges. We do work with member states to develop these solutions, both in national adaptation planning processes, through PNDA processes, but also in designing ecosystem-based adaptation approaches that incorporate nature-based solutions. And just a final slide on the UN Decade of Restoration. This was established for this decade in 2019 through a UN General Assembly resolution. What we're really aiming to do is to create a community, a global community, trying to break through barriers of awareness, lack of understanding of the impact of ecosystem restoration on development, developing skills and capacity, learning communities, and global tracking of land restoration projects. Okay, and at the CBD COP, we're going to be launching our 10 first flagships on landscape restoration. Different UN entities, different entities across the board will take responsibility for challenges, global challenges. Those will also be launched at the CBD COP, and that will be the main launch of the decade until 2030. So with that, and I hope I haven't taken too much time, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jessica. And I would ask now that Sadiq presents and talks to us a bit about the global platform for action on sustainable energy in displacement settings, so that we wrap up this first part of our conversation in terms of presentations.
Hello. Thank you very much, honorable speakers and audience. It is my pleasure to participate in this workshop. My name is Sadiq Jafrullah. I'm working at the Global Platform for Action on Sustainable Energy in Displacement Settings, which is hosted at UNITAR. And I'm actually today replacing Cristina Simonetti, who was supposed to come and attend this panel. Unfortunately, she got sick at the last moment, and I had to step in within a one-day notice. So if I mumble in my presentation, please excuse me. But I will try my best to introduce this displacement situation from the energy access point of view. First of all, let's present what is the GPA. Basically, the GPA itself is a platform which consists of 16 different organizations, including UN and non-UN organizations working in humanitarian context and also in development context. So the vision of the GPA is to achieve SDG 7 in displacement context, in displacement settings. And the platform is supported by German government, Norwegian government, NORCAP, and MEX. So I will give you a very brief introduction about the energy situation in displacement settings. So as we know that there are about 103 million displaced people around the world at this moment, or more actually. I'm quoting the number from latest UNHCR displacement data from mid-2022. And at the GPA, we have researched on energy access, and the latest number what we find is that 81% of people, displaced people living in camp settings, do not have the basic energy, the basic fuel for cooking. And besides, 94% of displaced people living in camp settings do not have access to electricity at all. What do they have is basically the photo you're seeing is kind of like a solar lantern which is given out in emergency situation. And that's all that they have. This percentage is not 100% accurate. It's also because this is based on estimation, and the data covers a number of countries and camp situation. But interesting to know that all these humanitarian organizations that are working and bringing sustainable or bringing humanitarian assistance to the displaced people are actually operating 11,400 generators, which approximately costs around $120 million US per year, which is a conservative number. But in other studies actually shows that the number is higher. And these different studies basically shows that the number is probably between 200 to 400 million US each year. If you would like to know more about this data, please look into the State of the Humanitarian Energy Sector report, which is published May this year. So let's take a look about the cooking energy situation in the displacement settings. In most cases, displaced people, as I mentioned, don't have access to the cooking fuel, and they often find shelter in like very densely populated area and have very limited resources and ability to pay. And when they use this firewood and charcoal for cooking, it creates a lot of smoke in the house, and that contributes to different diseases, respiratory problems, and other issues. And in most cases, women and children are the sufferer in this case. The slide is not moving, unfortunately. I'm trying. So that's kind of a situation in most displacement settings. And the photo you're seeing now is a bit more better solution, we may say, is with gas cook stoves, where you can use LPG. This photo is from Bangladesh Cox's Bazar. But in these cases, to bring in these kind of services requires a planned management and higher investment. So let's look into Bangladesh again and see the situation if we don't actually address the cooking topic. So this is a photo from 2017, just before the influx of refugees from Myanmar. And the next one is this one at the beginning of 2018. So you see the massive change already, where after the influx of refugees, they had to find shelter, and there was not enough cooking solutions out there, and that became the situation, as you can see. What happened later that year in 2018, this photo is from the same place, but a bit more zoomed in, and you can see the level of the situation that happens. And that's at the end of 2018. The current situation at this moment is a bit better. It looks a bit more greener after lots of project has been taken in the space, but still there is loss of biodiversity, and the slide is not moving, sorry. There is landslides happening every year, floods happening every monsoon season. There is hygiene issues, issues with firewoods, issues with the host communities regarding this biodiversity, and also, interestingly, with elephants. Because of this loss of biodiversity, elephants now lost their home, basically. And on all these situations basically shows that we really need to look into this situation, give some opportunities, integrate displaced people in the NDCs and national policies. I will very quickly go through the key challenges and opportunities. So in general, energy is not a formal priority in humanitarian assistance, and that's a big issue. Besides, as we are discussing today, that displaced people are often not included in national or international policy or energy access agendas. The finance is very low. In general, it's underfunded. I'm trying to move fast. There are limited expertise and capacities in the camp settings, in displacement settings as well. Also, the limited data, which really restricts humanitarian agencies to really bring forward the solutions on the ground. Today, let's move to the next one. Is when we talk about inclusion of refugees in the NDCs, the data basically shows that only 29% of the countries that submitted their the updates on NDCs includes some form of human mobility, and most other countries do not actually include at all this portion of the issue. Opportunities with clean energy is it's better for environment. Every dollar is spent on energy. Clean energy basically brings value of $1.4 to $1.7 in benefits, in externalities. For example, it has health benefits and all. And these are all the benefits of clean energy. I will just move forward. So I will basically finish my my presentation here, basically opening up two questions. Is that what is, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges of including displaced people in the NDCs, and how can we all work together to make it happen? Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sadiq and Jessica. And I then would take your questions and put the questions back to Romeo and to Sanjay from a perspective of supporting countries and a perspective of a member state. How do you see the conversation not only on the importance of access to energy for all, but how to transit that into displaced communities so that them too are added to the NDCs? I maybe start with Sanjay as a representative of the government of Bangladesh that suffers significantly from displacement and hosts more than 1 million refugees. How does the government of Bangladesh see this situation?
Thank you, moderator, and also to present very detailed, inclusive presentation, and also another panelist and in present of me participants. I welcome all you from Bangladesh. As you know that Bangladesh is a climate vulnerable country, and I before go my just answer that what actually we are doing in NDC. Bangladesh submitted its first NDC in 2015, and we included 3 sectors. One is transport sector, power sector, and industry sector. And our target to reduce only 36 million ton carbon dioxide equivalent. But if you see, in our updated NDC in 2021, we reduced more than 90 million ton carbon dioxide equivalent, and we included Apollo sector in our NDC, agriculture, livestock, fishery, and also forestry and waste sector included in our NDC. Now I want to go in details what the question raised that what actually is the situation of Bangladesh. As you know that Rohingya influx, 1.1 million population just in one district, and what actually they did in our area, some pictures shown by Sadiq, you see that more than 8,000 hectares of forest land totally destroyed, and 9,000 hectares cropland totally destroyed. And due to resettlement of these people, more than 8,000 hectares totally needed for resettlement. And another thing, every day, 7 lakh ton firewood needed for burn for their only cooking purpose. This is the scenario of actually what happening in our hill districts. And we are facing this issue, but Bangladesh government not sitting island. Because as you know that in our national adaptation plan and under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, we take initiative in our Cox's Bazar district for climate migrants. More than 4,000 families now resettle them in our Kurushkul projects, and all facilities including solar home system provided then improved copestocks. And in our another big project, Ashran project for homeless people, Honorable Prime Minister, that more than 42 lakhs families now we are sheltered in, gave them homes, shelters, and in these homes we facilitated solar home system there, also improved copestocks, and more than 8 million trees now planted whole area is our steps from our government. We are taking all these initiatives. And as you know that, and what our internal migration, as you know that major 3 rivers flowing over Bangladesh, and river erosion and sea level rise, what seeing in presentation by Jessica, that what the biggest threat for Bangladesh is sea level rise. And our southern part, salinity intrusion, agriculture strongly affected, and we are now affecting strongly. And I believe that UNEP and UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center come forward how we strengthen these activities. 2 portions there. One is to climate resilient housing for our coastal region, and another is how to improve solar system in Bangladesh, taking another parts by their help. And we believe that government and also our development partners with us, and we are strongly working with this. And another thing, as you know, that recently we submitted our national adaptation plan last week to UNFCCC, and in our national adaptation plan, that 230 billion USD is needed. And that's why we this year in COP27, we raised this issue, how we will implement our NEP is a major challenge for Bangladesh. And as you know that in last COP26, Bangladesh signed a Glasgow Declaration on Forestry and Land Use to protect to deforestation, any kind of deforestation in line with SDG Goal 15. And also we are in line with this whole system. Afforestation, deforestation, we are increasing. And in Bangladesh, we are taking under World Bank project, Shufal project, we are massive work to protect our Sundarban. And also, as you know, that Bangladesh is a biodiversity-rich country, and we protect our ecosystem. Biodiversity is our major challenge. So we believe with all our development partners, we are working, and we are Bangladesh facing all kinds of challenges. So now we stop, and then I will come again any questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. I would take your words and ask Romeo, noting that there's only 29% of the countries that are considering this, looking at the massive challenges that Bangladesh and other countries have, how can we support countries to mainstream climate mobility in the NDCs? How do you see, what are the challenges that you see to scale up this work? Romeo.
Can you? Yeah. Thank you very much. And this is a great choreography, I think, although we haven't been planning this in very much detail. Very, very glad to be here. Thank you very much for this enlightening presentations. The NDC partnership, as you know, we are a big coalition of climate action, 206, 207 members, 120 countries, amongst them also Bangladesh, working on the implementation of NDCs and mainstream the NDCs. And there's, of course, a real cause for also looking into the question of displaced people and the work there. And, of course, making sure that, like a lot of other topics that have not been on the agenda in the first round of NDCs, will be integrated in the future. And it is really important to understand, I think, that the NDCs are not a technical document, but they are something that you can build on, that can influence your national planning in so many respects, be it agriculture, be it housing, be it dealing with the crisis of refugees in the countries and displaced people within, and making sure that we also look into the root causes of displacement, right? And this is increasingly also a reason why I think we need to look into climate there. And let me make a couple of remarks here and probably put down 3 dimensions of the work we saw, and looking a little bit into our database, what we saw. And I will not repeat the stuff that I was researching on Bangladesh, because you were like framing this so rigorously. But number one, I think on the cause of displacement, listen to the Minister of Environment or Agriculture of the Republic of Chad. He will tell you, Mali, Burkina Faso, he will tell you that droughts, desertification will lead to conflicts between the farmers and the herders. And this is a root cause for conflict. This is a root cause for war even, and of course a root cause consequently for internal and international displacement, a great cause that we all need to work together on to fight. And this is the big picture that I hope we are getting done here, and in terms of the global commitments also of those that cause climate change. On a more national scale, of course, we see that there are good examples that we need to and can learn from. We have Jordan, for instance, where through the German Development Bank, we saw an example that host communities were equipped with PV systems, 46 megawatt installed that also cover not only, of course, the refugee and displaced people camps, but also the host communities. So instead of putting gensets there, which of course will also be removed, you leave something there, this is there to stay, and this is there to make a positive impact. Small scale, of course. One may argue, okay, we have bigger fish to fry, but I think it's a very, very good example, and it's cheaper, and it's cleaner. On that note, also more on the adaptation side and the resilience side, we saw from Belize that there is a vulnerability assessment being done in Belize, also taking care of making sure that there are steps to protect communities in the countries from damage caused by flooding, sea level rise, and a wise land use policy, which of course, and again, this we heard from Bangladesh, has an implication on the ability to deal with displaced people, and as we all can imagine, they have also quite a burden there to carry from neighboring countries. Last not least, I think with these examples and with the work that we are hearing, the NDC partnership, but also your platform, of course, going out there and showing these examples and learning from each other, sharing knowledge about it is extremely important. Whether it's through regional events on the climate weeks, for instance, but also globally, like in this context. But the willingness from the countryside and the country drivenness of the NDCs is of course important, and this is where we need to raise awareness first and foremost.
Thank you, Romeo. I think that we need to take use of opportunities, and we are at COP, and we have a very high-level political dialogue on some of the practicalities, but these dimensions of realities, challenges, and policy are sometimes difficult to navigate. I would like to ask the climate envoy of the Netherlands that is involved on these negotiations to give a few points. I'll give you my chair.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Jaime de Bourbon, indeed, Climate Envoy of the Netherlands, and I joined this session because I think it's so important what you do. And the title already says it, it's From Camps to Climate Negotiations. So I was listening to you and thinking, what message do I bring to the negotiation table? And I think it's really hard. Just a disclosure, I used to work for UNHCR. I know IOM's work very important. And if you look in the world, who are the most affected people? These are people that had to flee either conflict or persecution, or had to flee because of climate issues, that there's no possibility for them to survive in the area they are. And sometimes it's compounded. People had to flee conflict first, then have to flee again because of climate issues. So very important at this COP to listen to your voices and to listen to your issues. And indeed to see that both humanitarian agencies, development agencies, environmental agencies, and NGOs that work and help plan countries to plan to move forward are sitting together and figure this out, because this is just the start of thinking about this issue, which is only going to expand with time. What I bring for the climate negotiations, we have mitigation, adaptation, but we also have something called loss and damage. That means once you cannot adapt anymore and you permanently lose your livelihoods possibilities, what are the systems there to support you? Right now, people are just talking about money, and money is definitely needed. But what's the mosaic of loss and damage issues that will help people survive? So what I've heard here was a human-centric approach. When people have to flee and are in a difficult situation, what are all the different mechanisms from the environmental adaptation side, but to future survival side, that a person needs to be able to survive? And that broadens the discussion, or actually brings it back to reality, not just ideological talking and positioning between countries on these issues, but bringing it back, what do people need? So I'm bringing this back to the negotiations. I want to say you are all doing amazing jobs. You're the front line of thinking in these issues, and I'm reinvigorated again for the next round of negotiations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jaime. I think this opportunity to carry the voice and be the messenger of at least 100 million people living currently today on disaster settings is very relevant. And I will jump from there directly to Sadiq for one more question. In your view, what is the status and or the strategies for integrating displacement populations into national climate change and energy policy and planning?
Much. Thank you very much for the question. I think it's the answer to the question would probably be beneficial to come from a government representative. But what I would think, in my opinion, is as I mentioned in my presentation, that only 29% of all the NDCs submitted includes some form of human mobility. Some don't even mention displacement even. Some don't even mention refugees. So that's the status in my perspective. What I would like the government to invite to is to basically be bold. You know, AC for All here giving us this platform. One of their key campaign is asking everyone to be bold in taking the steps, be bold in making the decision for energy transition. So that's my invitation to the governments, and I would actually like to listen from the government representative that are present here on this issue, what they think the status is, what basically making the limitations for them to not include displaced people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. I will keep, Sadiq, I will keep a question for the government of Bangladesh after provocation, not a provocation, but asking Jessica to highlight a little bit more, because her presentation explained the vast complexity of these. How do you think that human rights and equity considerations can be better linked with mobility, adaptation, and development strategies? Because at the end, these are some of the fundamentals of the triggers that we just discussed on your presentation.
Sure, thanks. Well, I think the answer is you've got to develop user-centric strategies, adaptation strategies. The problem is that many displaced communities aren't recognized by governments because they come from neighboring countries. So if they're not recognized politically and they are not allowed to generate incomes, then they're sort of put in a box, except that they don't operate in a box because they have human needs. So that's why I tried to explain through our Kigoma region example is that what we're trying to take a landscape approach, an ecosystems approach to integrating at an ecosystem level, integrating the displaced communities into the management of those landscapes. When you're talking about internally displaced people, well, you know, that's, I think it's easier politically because they are nationals of the country, but those displaced communities, generally speaking, going to cities, also have very real needs that are unmet. There are no employment opportunities, housing may not be available, and so on. And so the idea is, how do you reduce the risk of these, you know, events from happening? And part of the solution is going to be investing in nature so the nature can do its job more effectively. We've published quite a lot in UNEP on the value of trees for rainfall. I mean, the statistics are amazing. The amount of water, moisture that trees transpire is pretty amazing, and they will bring rainfall in. So, you know, if you multiply that by hectares, thousands of hectares, and the teleconnections between trees and rainfall in neighboring countries is also in the research. So invest in nature, make sure that trees are protected, bring the rainfall in, increase the infiltration so that even if climate risks manifest themselves, the natural ecosystem can mitigate the effects somewhat. So I think that's part of the solution. But the other part, of course, is designing strategies where people are at the center and where the money that is brought to bear to help them really does help them and responds to their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I would then take the logic of those opportunities and ask Romeo, do you think that the governments and the different authorities at global and at national level understand this opportunity? Do you see this coming out? I think it's a bit in line what you said before, but to complement, do you see these opportunities?
Can you hear me? Ah, yeah, now it works. I think they see these opportunities, and of course there is a correlation between countries that suffer from these situations more than others, right? So we see that in, this pioneering work of Bangladesh, for instance. A colleague from Uganda, I think, is not here right now, but there's also some pressure there. Needless to say, Colombia, for instance, Belize, you name it, and I think taking this as an entry point to think about, the adaptation, resilience, and the mitigation side is extremely important. One thing there where I see coming from two countries, Germany and Italy, that not always have been the most welcoming to some of the refugees and putting them somewhere, in isolation. This integrated approach with the existing communities and leaving something there for the communities is extremely important. Otherwise, if you create kind of a competitive environment, so to speak, with a national, also the rural, poorer population, is certainly something that is not going to work well, and that is probably counterproductive. But definitely there is this need, and I would say that discussing this further and bringing in the community of climate into your communities and the other way around is extremely important.
Thank you. I would now ask Mr. Sanjay, because we have been talking in the future, but as you said, Bangladesh has a pioneer role on many of these approaches. So what governance structures do you think, or at least the ones you are more familiar with, to help design climate change mitigation and adaptation projects that include mobility options with dignity for vulnerable and displaced persons? I think that you have referred a few of the relocation projects, a few of the strengthening of evacuation capacity. Bangladesh owns the Cyclone Preparedness Program. Is a program that moves 1 million people into safety when there is a disaster threat in terms of a cyclone. It has its own national displacement policy that was launched at COP in Glasgow last year. Please tell us, what you see are also some of the challenges, but the opportunities to scale this work and what resources are needed.
As you know, that Bangladesh is the pioneer in disaster management. If you see, in 1970, in our disaster, that 1 million population died. And present situation last Sitang, only 7 people died. This is the advancement of our position. As you know, there's 76,000 volunteers now always ready when any signal. Then last situation, 40 lakhs people we evacuated within only 24 hours. This is Bangladesh now doing, and we have more than 42,000 shelter places in our coastal region, and these all are constructed by our government. So we believe the challenge is that we government alone is not, of course, is a major challenge, but we believe private sector, NGO, our development partner to come forward to us, and we working all together to face these challenges. Another thing that we recently adopted Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. What actually include in our Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, we give priority on nature-based solution and locally led adaptation. Why? That resettlement of migrant people to their own place is our target. When any migrant people rush to my Dhaka city, is a major problem for us, and that's why you go them to how we resettle them in their original place, and that's why we take the projects with support of UNEP, that climate resilient housing in their salinity intrusion area, and we gave them all kinds of facility, like gave the solar home system, drinking water, rain casting, drinking water to help them to resettle them in their original position. So our government is working with this, and we believe that, and not only this, our development partners also coming to help us. ADB very eagerly waiting to support us to implementation of our national adaptation plan. We recently submitted it, and we have already, as you know, that we have 100 years Delta plan. We prepared it with the support of Netherlands. So we are now working, and we believe Bangladesh is a climate vulnerable country. We always seeking support from development partners. And as a whole, we believe that only 1,047,000 kilometer our area, but our population now 165 million. And agriculture is our major challenge, food production major challenge. As you know that Bangladesh is now third largest rice producing country. And we are the fourth largest food production, vegetable production, 7th position in now. So our government, we working with all these barriers, how to, we are now working like that in our salinity intrusion area, we giving priority on saline tolerant varieties. And we are now in our submerged area, floating gardening is a new idea. And in our under climate trust fund, it's our own fund, 800 million. We taking more than 800 projects overall Bangladesh to address mitigation and adaptation issues. These all are I believe that these are all our achievements, and we are facing this. And what Jessica said, that adverse impact of climate change, we are now facing these issues, and we are actually the vulnerable country. So we need support from all, and that's all about from Bangladesh. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think that we made some savings in time, which is always good for us. And I would ask Jessica, my question would be on your presentation about Iraq and being in Iraq now a country in transition and having had a massive emergency related to conflict recently. The challenges are different, right? For a country that produces oil, is affected by climate change, is desertic, had conflict. This complexity is challenging. Do you see environmental considerations and environmental conservation at the top of the agenda, or the pressure to pump development and get back on track with the economic prosperity hampering this bigger discussion?
It's interesting because before Iraq produced oil, it was the biggest date-producing nation, on the planet. It produced a lot of dates, but it's the kind of resource curse. As soon as oil is discovered, everything falls behind. So there isn't enough consideration of environment, but climate change is providing, I think, a helpful spotlight on the issue. So the challenge is now we've got these climate storylines developed, we can communicate the risk. By the way, all of this was developed in a very participatory way with the institutions in Iraq. The idea now is to develop adaptation strategies, to cost those strategies, and to develop a national adaptation plan. This needs a lot of dialogue with government, a lot of advocacy, a lot of communication. We often downplay those aspects, but they're really important. We really need to speak the language of the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Planning, find out what they're really interested in, and tailor the messages. But the evidence is clear. If nothing is done and climate change continues as it is, Iraq is going to be facing large flows of people from rural to to urban areas, and it's going to be facing extreme water scarcity and salinization issues. We know that, so we have to manage it now. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. And it is very interesting to see, because on one side we have Bangladesh, where the excess of water and wind creates a certain dynamics of impacts of climate change. We have Iraq with water scarcity. It's a very similar problem with two different presentations. And this also poses a question on how civil society engages. Romeo, I'll put to you, how can civil society at large, facing the context they have, can contribute to this shift and evolution on the NDCs? We know that states lead the process. There's a very more formal thinking on what is needed, how much money it will cost, who will intervene. But if we really want to scale attention to these questions, we have to have civil society exerting influence on governments. What, if you can, would be your suggestion to create these internal dynamics?
I think it's a bit of a tricky question, of course, but I think what we've been seeing, or what I'm sure what is happening and what we see on a daily basis, the more climate, be it mitigation aspects or adaptation aspects, are up in the agenda on the political level, the higher up it is, the better it gets, because then you have the Prime Minister, the President, Head of State, making the connection between exactly those actors that you need, the Ministers of Finance, Agriculture, Energy, and so forth. Not only the, as they sometimes call them, the tree huggers, right, from the Environmental Ministry that sit there a little bit on the side, unfortunately, often. So if you have and you see it with the Fridays for Future movement, for instance, if you have the people on the streets peacefully asking for, a future, basically, that really drives a dynamic, and creating this dynamic amongst the society as a whole is extremely important. And I think that then pushes the agenda up, and then you get the dynamic that is then again needed for the top-down approaches that are also needed, including then also the engagement of the countries in mainstreaming climate and in budgeting and so on and so forth. I think that's the short, vague answer to the question.
Thank you. Sound is not following our thoughts. But I would try to ask Sanjay, because I think there is the importance of sometimes compartmentalizing some of the issues, right? We talk a lot about the transformation, the energy transition, right? And it's difficult to conceptualize this in our day-to-day, where we press a button and energy comes, and it's easy in many parts of the country. But if we look at displaced persons and persons living in areas where that service does not exist, right? It's not infrastructure per se. There are opportunities for innovation. Can we, Sanjay, learn from the ways that we, in displacement settings, try to bring energy, try to create the conditions to people? Is that innovation exportable to the mindset and the opportunities that the rest of the world wants to see from the just transition? Over to you. What can we do new? What can we learn from displacement settings?
All right. At first, I thought the question is going to. Okay. Don't worry. So what I think is, first of all, whenever we talk about energy access in general, especially for displacement settings, one of the biggest challenges that we face is the fact that displacement situation is seen as a temporary. So whenever there is energy solution idea is brought up, the question becomes, what would you do with these solutions if people are not going to be here? But in reality, in most displacement settings or refugee settings, I should say, becomes protected situation, just like Bangladesh or other areas as well. And because this situation is seen as temporary, there is always risks for private sector to invest, and also the humanitarian sector to bring in those solutions. And I actually see a good opportunity here to have the merge between the humanitarian and development sector, so that a solution is brought up in a situation, in a settings, and can actually help promote energy transition for the host communities, for the local communities. And that solution can sustain, and the host government, the host communities can actually benefit from these solutions that are brought up in these settings. Hope I answered the question. Thank you.
No, you answered. I think that is a bit what Romeo was saying. What do we leave behind? And bridging a bit the gap between the needs of these communities, how to engage the host communities or the communities where these people are displaced, and what solutions for the future we have. I would have one last question to Sanjay. In relation to the government of Bangladesh, you talked about the climate prosperity plans. This is an initiative of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which is to shift the way we think about economical development from from money into prosperity. It brings a human dimension to this. Can you elaborate a bit what is a climate prosperity plan? Where are the opportunities? And if climate mobility can be mainstreamed in them?
In our Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, we give priority from vulnerability to resilience and resilience to prosperity. Because as you know that and target is 2050. And one thing very clear that in our Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, self-reliance in our solar energy is our major priority. And also we give priority in our wind energy, specifically in our Bay of Bengal offshore wind energy. We give priority. And our main target to go to common people with locally led adaptation. Again, I want to reiterate the locally led adaptation and nature-based solution to protect our biodiversity ecosystem is our major challenge. But in our Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, we included all these issues, and we believe that Bangladesh, like not only Bangladesh, 56 climate vulnerable countries now showing that this prosperity plan we may introduce in our country, and they are now starting to preparing this document. And we believe that Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan is the window that to address our vulnerable people, climate migrant people, and how to address them. And we go to them with solar home system, improved coke-stoking for temporary, what Sadiq said, that recently to our Rohingya people, we resettle them in our new area with solar home system. It was a package, rain custom system for ensuring pure drinking water all together, and they accepted it. Even UN people visited this area, and they gave certificate. This is very good idea, Bangladesh what actually taken. And in another thing that in our Delta plan, we identify all our Bangladesh in 6 areas. One is hilly area, one is coastal area, and one is drought area, one is submerged area. All together, we address all these issues because as you know that cyclones frequently and flash flood in Bangladesh is a major challenge. And in our Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, we address all these issues, how we settle our people, migrant people, and also riverbank erosion is our major challenge, and we also address in our Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. And in our Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy Action Plan, we now updated this in 2022. And another thing that we have so many documents, but is as you know that climate change is a cross-cutting issue. 26 ministries now working to address the adverse impact of climate change. And we have developed a fiscal framework for budgetary unit. And more than 7% of our budget now allocated only for address climate change issues. And one thing again I want to say, the government alone is not possible. We work now in whole of society approach. Our NGOs, our development partners and private sector, major challenge, we now to involve them. As you know that private sector always thinking with profit sharing, but they are now always ready in mitigation. But Bangladesh is very much insignificant in greenhouse gas emission. So we always welcome our private sector to come to invest in adaptation area. Then that will help us into our government plan to implement them. Thank you all.
Thank you. And I think we are getting to the end of our time, but I would like to provoke our panel on an exercise of simplification. If there would be one message that people should, be able to share with others, to tweet, to use it as advocacy, what would be to each of you the core message that you'd like to pass to this broader audience on the topic of most concern to you under the discussion and what you hear today? Because I think it's very important that these different angles complementing each other, they bring a stronger voice on the discussions we had today. So that I would invite each of you to a short intervention on a key message that you would like to share with the audience. Sadiq, I will start by you.
Challenging. I would actually say that while achieving SDG 7, let's not leave behind displaced people. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica, can I ask you...
Hello? Yeah. I would say that both displacement and mobility is more difficult and more conflictive when there is scarcity. So it touches upon the point that you're making, that you need to establish benefit sharing systems, okay? And one way that you can do that is by investing in nature. If you invest in nature, you create abundance in the natural ecosystem that can help to mitigate some of the risks and help to establish benefit sharing mechanisms. On that point, I would like to advertise an event at 5 o'clock that is talking about natural-based solutions and the links to work and employment in the Just Transitions Pavilion at 5 o'clock today. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And I think it's an excellent an excellent suggestion, because the skills of the future are also part of what mobility in the future would be. I would ask Sanjay his message.
I believe that not in our all development plan. What actually our motto? Vulnerable people, gender issues, and disabled people, indigenous people, ethnic people, and all together in our plan, we work together to address them. And then we will successful. Thank you all.
Thank you. And Romeo, we came here to talk about the NDCs, so I cannot not end asking you what would be our message to all of us.
I mean, the core message of the partnership is country ownership, country leadership, and focus of the international community on exactly that, making sure you're not dumping pre-cooked solutions on our partners.
Thank you so much, and it's up to me to end the session by first thanking you for being here, for helping to digest this complex issue, to look at different angles, different perspectives, and highlight that as of today, conversation, as Romeo just said, countries' leadership, the partnerships, putting the welfare of people, but also the respect for the environment, for the resources, and how we manage those resources will be of particular importance to the world, but more concerning to people in displacement because they have less access, they have less opportunities, they have less a voice. And I think the panel today brought that voice and we have contributed to the discussion. I also thank you all for being here with us. And I was told there's a few snacks so that we can mingle a bit and have a bit more of an informal conversation. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day.